Not everyone wants to take their holiday break on the beach. For many, it's the perfect opportunity to take on an expedition. So earlier this year, I went up to Scotland to check out one of 3 British coast-to-coast routes, the Great Glen Canoe Trail. This stunning 60-mile route passes through some of Britain's most jaw-dropping landscapes, with views of its highest peaks and expansive lochs. The Great Glen Canoe Trail follows the Caledonian Canal from Fort William in the west, through Fort Augustus at the tip of Loch Ness, to Inverness on the east coast. Sadly, on this trip, I'm staying firmly on dry land, but this does mean that I can better see how the route sits in the landscape. The view from where the canal starts at Corpac back to Fort William across Loch Linnhe makes for an inspiring sight, while Fort William itself is a perfect base for any expedition. Access at the entrance to the canal is easy, and the early stages are sheltered, but it's not long until you reach your first challenge, a portage up Neptune's staircase at Bannerby. 8 lochs lift the canal up about 65 feet, so taking a set of wheels is a very good idea. At the top, putting in again is easy, and then the long stretch to Gairlochie begins. For this section of the route, the Nevis Range is ever present, and if you're lucky, there's views of Ben Nevis's infamous North Face and the surrounding peaks. The canal gently snakes through the valley, surrounded on all sides by the most beautiful scenery. I just walked along the canal a little bit from where I holed up last night. I can't quite get my head around how beautiful this place is. It's as though they surveyed the area as a whole and thought, what would be the most achingly beautiful landscape that we could build a canal in? At Gairlochie, the canal joins with its first loch, and again, it feels as though everything about this junction has been designed to inspire. Loch Lochy may only be about a third of the length of Loch Ness, but for me, this is the jewel in the crown of the trail. It's a fairly long paddle at over 9 miles, but you won't be thinking about the distance as you travel down this stunning fjord-like body of water. After a short stint on the next canal section, you reach Loch Oich, which is about half the length of Loch Lochy. There's not a lot to get excited about, but it's still a beautiful stretch of open water. And at the end, there's the historic Bridge of Oich over the river next to the canal, which makes a great backdrop for a rest. After another fairly long stretch of canal, you reach the outskirts of Fort Augustus and what is pretty much the halfway point. If you're planning a multi-day expedition as opposed to an endurance challenge, then a stop off at Fort Augustus is definitely a good move, because from here it's straight out onto the most testing stretch of the route, Loch Ness. Yet again, the junction between canal and loch doesn't disappoint, but once you're past the canal mouth, it's just you, the loch and Nessie. Don't be fooled by these benign images of still waters. Loch Ness, when it's minded to, can be a beastie in its own right, with big swells and sea-like conditions out in the middle when the wind's up. So this section alone requires some experience, and certainly a decent capability in a boat to be safe. Leaving the warnings aside though, this is a stunning piece of water, and if you're fortunate enough to have good weather like I did, it'll be a paddle to remember. Once through Loch Ness, the home stretch takes you back along the canal until you reach Inverness. The River Ness goes through Inverness itself, and it's well worth spending a little time there once you've completed the route. The canal though, traverses around the edge of the city until it joins with the Beaulieu Firth, which is the end of the route. Of course, if you want to go from open sea to open sea, you'll have many more miles to travel, but the scenery alone will make up for that. This trail has been really well set up, and there's a great website with all the information you'll need to plan a trip. Of the 3 coast-to-coast routes in the UK, this may be the shortest, but it's probably the one that gets you the closest to having a true wilderness adventure.